Welcome. I'm Barbara Call, Senior Director of Content Strategy at CIO Marketing Services, and I'll be your host for today's presentation titled Full Stack Observability, Expanding the Digital Experience, and brought to you by CIO, IDC, AppDynamics, and E+. I'd like to start by introducing today's speakers. First up is Stephen Elliott, Group Vice President, I&O, Cloud Operations, and DevOps at IDC. Welcome, Stephen. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Barbara. It's great to be here. As you mentioned, I'm responsible for the research and advisory for the DevOps and infrastructure and operations and cloud ops. And full stack observability is a very hot button issue with the enterprise IT organizations that we advise. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this.
All right, great. Nice to have you, Stephen. And my second guest is Justin Mesker, Vice President of Cloud and Data Center Solutions for E+. Welcome, Justin. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate you having me today. So I lead the cloud and data center businesses at E+, and I spend the majority of my time with customers talking about challenges they're facing in hybrid deployments across on-prem, public cloud, and really taking that, creating sets of metrics that provide value back to the business. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion with Stephen today.
All right, nice to have you. And now we'll hand things over to Stephen to kick us off.
Sure, thank you. And I think to kick off, one of the things that we've been talking about with IT organizations and leadership teams is this whole idea of what is full stack observability. And it's really critical. Most executive teams, CEO suite, they realize that their technology architecture is in fact their business architecture now. And everything's running on applications and is very transaction dependent. And so full stack observability really provides line of business managers, various technology teams across site reliability engineering, IT operations, infrastructure platform teams, NetOps teams, security teams, offers them access to critical information that drives availability performance of their digital services. Now, as we all know, these applications are very, very complex. And whether we're talking about traditional classic application architectures or emerging Kubernetes container-based applications that are residing on various multiple cloud architectures, there's just a tremendous amount of complexity to make sure that these services are working properly. And when they don't, where the problem is and how to fix it. Now, on top of that, we're finding that executives, it's not just about, is something working? And if not, let's go fix it. It's really about, well, how is this tying to the business? What are the implications when a service starts to degrade or doesn't perform well? What are the implications on revenue, on churn rate, on organizational reputation? So we're finding that a lot of organizations have moved from sort of this classic posture of getting static dashboards and pretty much static information to much more very active dashboards where you can go and explore into a particular problem. You can send information and context to different stakeholders across technology in the business. You can also really take advantage of different analytic models that help drive root cause, that help speed up problem identification resolution, and potentially even avoid those by driving significant opportunities in the prevention of these problems. So what's fascinating here is we've got the technology teams and the business teams that are part of the story. We've got complicated modern and classic application architectures, and we have business metrics. And the business side of this is so important because we all engage digitally now more so than ever when we spend to go get goods, or when we're just having a great engagement opportunity with a company. And this is driving a positive digital experience. So this whole notion of full stack observability is really about start with the business context, start with an understanding of the customer and the journey they're going to have with your organization. What are those moments that matter during that digital journey? And then it all is predicated on successful, high-performing application stack and transaction capabilities to make sure that digital experience, that customer journey is positive. And this is for everyone. Sometimes we'll get calls from IT organizations to say, wow, I'm not there yet. And it's like, well, actually you are there. And you've got to think about how to strategize around this and to drive sort of a modern approach to high performing services. So, Justin, what's your sort of interpretation or take on full stack observability?
I love what you just said about, so many people thinking I'm not there yet, or I'm not ready for this yet, because the business is, the business needs it. I think we're all talking about it in a different way. And I think we're at an evolution point between what technology leaders are to an organization. This isn't the day of, you have a IT leader who's just managing data centers and uptime. You're talking about technology leaders that are sitting in board meetings that are driving the future of the company. And when you look at some of these terms, I mean, when's the last time you talked to an IT leader about things like revenue and churn rate and reputation? Those were things in the past that were not necessarily being thought of there. And as this evolution happens and technology leaders are becoming business leaders more often, I think this is huge, because observability, you can't take action without observing. And I think this whole concept of you're not observing from a bottom-up lens of technology, you're observing from a top-down lens of what do your end customers care about, what do you as a business care about, and then what do you as a technology leader need to deliver inside of this whole space. And I think that's a really good summary of what it means. And it'll be a good discussion around where everybody's going with it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the business context and starting with what are you trying to achieve from a business perspective, and what that customer journey looks like, and what do they appreciate in terms of the transaction or the type of engagement that they'll have with the company or the digital product, et cetera. Starting there and then sort of building back is become hypercritical in the successful full stack observability strategy. As we sort of dig into this on this next slide, what we found are conversations with technology organizations that are really thinking through, okay, where do I start? How do I think about FSO and performance monitoring? And a lot of companies will call and they'll say, hey, I've got stuff here. I've deployed tools, I've got teams and processes in place here. What's different? What's different about this? One of the things that we find as we sort of go through this conversation with these organizations is we get them really thinking about, well, you probably have some classic monitoring already deployed, collecting metrics or logs or traces. Maybe you're doing some polling, maybe using open telemetry, different technologies, sometimes which are collecting important information, but it's pretty siloed. And sometimes you can't get this information to the right people. Sometimes the dashboards are pretty static. And a lot of times these conversations are very much within a team, or they're very much IT centric, don't include any security. Analytic models are pretty basic. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not increasingly good enough. And when you think about the number of people and teams involved, the importance, as we were just talking about, of the business outcomes that you're really supporting for highly performing services, the importance of security in these conversations, which more and more SecOps teams are getting involved in early warning systems of problems that are actually security related when it comes to impacting the performance of services and digital products. And of course, look, there's so much information coming in from metrics, logs, traces, container-based Kubernetes architectures. It's just so complex across the networking infrastructures that this information now, you require analytics to analyze it and to figure out, here's what matters, here's what you should pay attention to as a team or set of individuals to identify a problem before it occurs, potentially even predict a problem. And so we're finding that a lot of different analytics have to be applied to these data sets because it's hard to scale manually. It's virtually impossible at this point. So a lot of opportunities here to take the next step, to do the maturity around the teams and around the technologies and take advantage of the possibilities of what full stack observability can bring to these teams. Justin, have you seen sort of similar progressions with the customers you advise?
Yeah, absolutely. And the term progression is perfect. It's not that the left side is old and wrong and the right side is new and right. It's about the fact that, over on the left hand, which is where everybody's coming from, it was a world of making sure things don't go wrong. And wrong was very much a black or white, things are up or things are down. And things are monitored and managed inside of silos, done by grabbing, basic logs from everything and just as much data as possible. And you get lots of noise. You become very reactive because you're processing so much noise, and you're always looking at the technology underneath, which means a problem has manifested itself at the business layer long before you likely knew what was going on. So when you think evolution, like you said, we look at what FSO means as an evolution to classic monitoring, and I key in on a few things. End-to-end not meaning application to storage like it used to, but end-to-end meaning end customer and their satisfaction to your platform, right? Those are the ends that you care about in that. In-depth analysis, not just looking and saying red or green, but what exactly does that mean contextually to your customer's actual experience and satisfaction with the service you're providing. Role-based, I key on here, is making sure this is role-based towards what type of user, what type of person, the KPIs they care about. So it's putting different KPIs up for different people that are going to care about different things. And then that goes directly into, business-centric, which if you're keeping score at home, I think we've said about 56 times already. That's really about making sure that your roles are matching with what you care about in that business-centric lens. And then really getting down to the bottom part of the analytics-based approach, auto remediation and optimization. That all comes down to how can I get those early warning systems, like you mentioned, and fix a problem before it manifests itself on the business side. Things can go wrong on the back end and you can fix it before an end user is dissatisfied. So why wouldn't you strive to be there? And that really leads down to the bottom, which is just the observability is for everybody. This isn't about IT. It's not about line of business. It's not about the dev team. It's really about everybody getting the visibility, the ability to do things as efficiently as possible and be as proactive as possible to provide ultimately the one thing that we all jointly care about, which is that end user experience, right? And making sure that our end users are as happy as possible.
Yeah, and it's great you mentioned that, because I think one of the things was just talking to a large insurance company on this topic, and we were talking to the IT ops team, and they were talking about monitoring, and they had pretty good systems in there, and they realized that the amount of information that they need to get access to, they didn't quite have yet. They also realized that they have more than at any other point in their operating history. More people need this information across the site reliability engineering team, the operations, the DevOps teams, and even security managers are getting more involved. And they mentioned even at one point they have a relatively new infrastructure platform team. And what was fascinating was they were really starting to have more in-depth conversations with those teams to figure out, what type of improved process can they offer? What are the requirements for the DevOps-oriented applications that are flowing through, those systems and processes and teams? What's the type of information and the role of automation in the story? And then certainly the analytic models. And what's fascinating was as they were sort of going down this path, they were starting to discover, new ways to do things. They were starting to think about, advanced dashboards and who they could show this information to, and how these different stakeholders could ingest it and say, hey, I'm part of a faster process. And then on top of that, the other thing that was pretty fascinating was the VP of the ops team started to think about what we're talking about here in terms of, in this case, what are the applications that they're going to support, and what do those applications bring to those line of business folks, right, to the service owners as they describe them. And in certain cases, it was, hey, we're generating a certain number of policies in the field in a particular region per day. Or processing a certain number of, accidents in a day, and really thinking about the business processes that these applications are supporting, and how better improving digital services, faster problem identification, even preventive challenges when certain holidays might bring up more car accidents. It was one of the discussions, how certain areas that they know could be potential challenges for certain applications from a workload perspective, they can start planning for that more effectively. And it was great because we sort of went from, okay, here's what we're doing in the technology, to, okay, here's what we can do. Here are additional people we need to build tighter relationships with. And here are the business processes and the business outcomes that we can have a direct impact on because of this investment. And so it was, it was a people, it was a process and technology. And I think what was really neat at the end of the conversation, the senior executive said, this can help us drive a data-driven culture. And, we all have great opinions, but when we can walk into a room and say, hey, here's what the data is showing us as a team. Here's where, where we were. Here are the higher reliability levels. Here's the faster response times we have. Here's the number of, things we're preventing. All of a sudden, a lot of conversations start to go your way. When you start to ask for more budget, and you start to ask for, more collaboration and teamwork and higher levels of automation. So it was pretty fascinating to see this team sort of go from this pure technology discussion to, wow, this is going to impact our opportunities from a career perspective, and impact our process opportunities, our data-driven cultural opportunities, and then help us walk into these conversations where sometimes politics are a big part of it, but to say, hey, here's data, and this is what we've been doing, and look at the progress we've made, and look at the impact it's had on these businesses and these applications that are driving, a lot of times revenues or customer reputation. So it was pretty neat to see that. Have you seen sort of similar transformations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the people that we're talking about, when you look at this type of, business driven by technology, you're talking about data scientists, you're talking about innovation teams, you're talking about DevOps and SREs and all these people, that when we can make their lives easier, we can accelerate business outcomes much, much faster. And I think everything you talked about there was really data for everybody, visibility for everybody, with the ability to make better decisions. And when Stephen, you mentioned kind of the art of the possible concept, not what am I doing, but what could I be doing, and really remove the boundaries from what your imagination looks like. You really need to unleash those innovation and DevOps and SRE teams to be able to go out and kind of take those boundaries off. And I'll tell you, without data, without insight, there's a lot of nervousness about doing that. And I think that, this topic is one that I'm seeing everywhere right now, primarily because of that. Everybody wants to accelerate what the business can do with technology, but without those data points, it's a really tough thing to embark on.
Yeah, Justin, it's great you brought that up, because I was having another conversation with a online financial firm, and we were talking about site reliability engineering and observability. And it was pretty interesting because they had put the building blocks together around observability being foundational to enabling this relatively new practice for them of site reliability engineering. And within SRE, there's a lot of time spent initially on problem identification, resolution, change management, and trying to drive a tighter relationship with the business. And when you look at full stack observability and the opportunities around driving service level indicators and service level objectives, and the data that's required to have a conversation around error budgets, and just having that business connotation around this, you're able to really drive trust with the line of business and the service owners. But you're also really using that data that you're collecting to say, look, here's the right type of service level indicators we need. Here's the ranges, and let's create effective service level objectives for the service. And ultimately, getting to that business perspective of, look, here's the right level of system reliability at the right price point. And it's just fascinating to be able to go through that process and make no mistake, it's a journey. This is hard stuff. It doesn't happen overnight, but if you don't have the right information, you don't have that sort of perspective on what should I be paying attention to and what matters, and how do I sort of get rid of the noise and just focus on the things that matter when there's a particular problem in a service, or potentially something that's building right in time over the service and the performance of that service. That's what full stack observability can provide. And it was neat to sort of see this SRE group start to think strategically about full stack observability and think about how this information can help them, streamline SLIs and SLOs, and how they can have this more contextual conversation with the line of business managers around, the business side and the importance of highly performing services, and, having error budgets and thinking about the right level of cost, for these services. It was just great, because they felt empowered. They felt, pretty good about where they were going and the types of trust and the type of business outcomes that they could deliver. It was pretty neat to see, because let's face it, a lot of business managers don't really have good connotation for all this technology, but they certainly understand, hey, my product or service isn't working. That's not good. Our revenue's impacted. I'm getting a call from the CEO or my executive manager. I need to know what's going on. Everybody understands that. And so the way that these teams can support that and help solve and prevent those, it's a powerful place to be coming from. And we're seeing that more and more, particularly with these teams that are saying, hey, we want to move from sort of this classic story to full stack observability story, and SREs are a big part of this, as are DevOps teams and even platform infrastructure teams, security operations teams. It's just a great time to be in this space, and it's a great time to be sort of taking this journey.
Yeah, trust is is an interesting term you use there, because I think there's trust between the teams as they start working together, right? Line of business and IT and development working more and more hand in hand to deliver those high-end business outcomes. But trust as you're federating out onto other platforms that don't live in your data center. Trust as you start to build applications in the cloud and leverage SaaS applications. The more you have visibility to what's happening across those platforms, the more you can trust. And I think that, that data leads to trust. And that ultimately leads to that kind of panacea of a C-suite that has a TV monitor up in their office where they actually have KPIs that they individually care about. The CFO seeing the financial, the CEO seeing customer sat, et cetera, where they see those, they trust them. It's going to lead them to trust the teams more, right? It's going to open up budget for more tools and more people, because they're going to say, look, I get really well-defined information here that I can trust and know that my customers get what they need. I mean, that really changes the dynamic between the business and technology leaders overall.
Yeah, and I'll say too, the other thing, and it's directly to that sort of trust and relationship point that you made, Justin, is this is ultimately, it's about the customer, and it's about the customer experience. And I know, with sort of the situation the world's been in the past 2.5 years, we've got customer experience, and certainly employee experience is more important than ever. And really, when you think about the way that we digitally engage now almost every day, that it's pretty fascinating that understanding who the customer is and what do they value, right? Everybody values a secure transaction. Everybody values a high-performing service. Everybody wants a mobile application that works really well. Everybody, all the kids want a great, PlayStation experience, etc. So it's fascinating that now, more so than ever, full stack observability provides this connotation, this on-ramp for what type of customer experience do you want to provide? And, recognizing that there are probably going to be problems at some point in those services because the complexity is high, because it's hard to do on a global basis. And so recognizing, how do you think about what that customer really wants in terms of that trusted transaction and that engagement model, and having the tools, the processes the right level of automation, the right use of analytic models and data collection, having that all in play and just creating that foundation for a great customer experience, is just a strategic way to build that relationship with the business. And it engenders trust. There's no doubt about it. We've seen it over the years where companies that have these conversations with the line of business and they start talking in business terms, they start thinking about what are the business metrics that matter to that manager. And then they have a conversation about who is that end customer? What are they going to really want as an experience? And all this is great conversation starters for full stack observability. And it drives a lot of good learnings too. We've found that a lot of teams start to, get excited about this and they're able to understand, wow, here's what this means as part of this full stack observability process. And here's what we're delivering with the business. And here's how we're having a strategic impact on the business. I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing to be able to do. And it goes all the way up to the C-suite and the technology executives and the CIOs that are really not aligning with business strategy. They're driving business strategy. So we're seeing a lot of that. And I guess, Justin, any additional thoughts or around this?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked all the time, how and where do you get started? And what you were just saying to me is always the answer is you got to set goals. You got to understand what the business cares about. And you've got to really figure out what that means to you. FSO or any other, business alignment to technology conversation, you're never going to get an answer for somebody else that's going to match yours exactly. So it's figured out for you what's a win. What's a win for the organization? What's a win for some of the C-suite executives that are trying to gain more insights? And then you ultimately set your goals, get buy-in, that everyone's working towards the same thing, that you're building towards the right thing, and that you're iterating with the end users that are going to consume these KPIs. Make sure that you're not just keeping behind the curtain, and then at the end you say, hey, how does it look? But more along the way of, hey, is this the type of data you're looking for? Constant user testing, et cetera. And just attack it in bite-sized chunks. That, trying to go to the holy grail of visibility to all things at all times with all metrics, you'll be working towards that forever. So I think it's bite-sized chunks, it's measure, it's cut, it's repeat, and keep going. That's what I've seen successful so far.
Yeah, I agree with that, everything you said. And I think in addition, we've seen companies start to think about creating observability teams and, put it down on paper. Here's the team, and start to sort of put down, here's our sort of, timeline for driving new capabilities. Here are they identify the business stakeholders that they're going to work with on particular application services. We've also found, to your point about KPIs, where they actually have a slide on, here is the customer. Here's how we define them. Here's what they expect. Here's acceptable levels of availability. And they're starting to, sort of have that clear definition. Think about the right processes. Think about the often global footprint. What's that transaction path look like? Is the application, container Kubernetes based in a particular hyperscaler? Is it more classic? I mean, really just put that, I would say, a blueprint down for it, and sort of all the things you talked about, Justin, building that into a nice, tight business case and slide deck. And so you can walk into a room and say, look, here's why we want to move this forward. Here are the business opportunities that we have. Here's how we think this is going to help drive great business outcomes that are measurable, which is, important, but also that can really, drive that business relationship and really help, propagate more efficient and more effective operations of these services moving forward. So, we've seen that sort of as a transition for companies that are looking to sort of, make these investments in full stack observability. So, Justin, did you have some additional content that you wanted to chat about?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, this is an area that that I'm passionate about. Just getting those getting those business outcomes more tangible for people and, less talking and more action. So, this is where I spend a lot of my time, where, E Plus spends a lot of time advising our customers, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this.
Well, great. Yeah, no, it's been great. I appreciate the time here. And now, Barbara, I'll hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. That was great. In closing, I'd like to thank both my speakers, Stephen Elliott from IDC and Justin Mesker from E Plus. For additional information, be sure to visit the resources area in your console, take the short survey to receive information directly from E Plus, or use one of the URLs shown on screen. And thanks for joining us. For CIO, IDC, AppDynamics, and E Plus, I'm Barbara Call.